Now that we have an idea of what big picture is trying to do, let's talk about why big picture. Let's put all the models that we've been looking at on a spectrum of lowest autonomy to highest autonomy. Of course, we have the traditional system at one end of the spectrum. I started the series by talking about free to learn and democratic education, which is clearly on the other end of the spectrum with absolute freedom given to the kids and zero intervention from adults. As an adult, you're literally supposed to not do anything proactively because the idea is whatever you do will most likely interfere with the learning. So you're there if the kids need you, but otherwise you don't interfere. And then we have big picture, which of course has an incredible degree of freedom and autonomy. But there are a couple of constraints that we introduce relative to the democratic system. First, there's a mandate with big picture that whatever the kids do lead to some kind of real world output. Second, there's a much bigger role for adults in the big picture system. We have advisors who get to know each kid at a very deep level. They help the kids connect their interest to the real world, and they also track and monitor the progress of each kid and might push a little bit if they don't see much progress. So now why did we introduce these constraints? In our earlier video around the role of adults, we spoke so much about being very careful about imposing any of our ideas on the kids. So the same goes for these ideas. There better be a damn good reason for introducing these constraints. And here's for me the most important reason for why we do this. We give up a little bit of the freedom and autonomy. And by the way, as we discussed, we're taking away only like 5 to 10%, but we gain something very important in return. So, what is that? You know, in our free to learn video, we had this whole section about learning versus performance, where we said that the traditional schools are not at all focused on learning and are focused entirely on performance. But if you're like most parents, you must be thinking, hang on, learning is important, but I want performance too. I want my child to be able to perform and deal with the pressures and the competition in the world. And friends, that's exactly what we're gaining by introducing these constraints. Because in democratic education, we have this radical freedom in which adults can't really demand or expect anything from the kids. But these two little constraints that we added with Big Picture is helping us bring the performance angle. In Big Picture, we expect kids to be productive. Of course, they can choose any real world field that they want to pursue, but we expect them to produce real world output. Of course, the moment you create this expectation, now you need someone to track and monitor it, which is where the advisors come in. So these two constraints that we introduced help us create an expectation around performance and also help us measure and monitor that performance. Now, honestly, this is a huge point. So really the rest of this video is about understanding why this little change is really important. Because when we talk about absolute freedom and autonomy, there's always this one criticism that pops up. You're taking the pressure away. This doesn't reflect the real world. To be successful in the real world, you need to perform. You need to be competitive. So in the democratic system, you're just creating a bubble where kids are running around happy and free. But is that really going to prepare them for the real world? By the way, this is not my perspective. In fact, I think this is not the right way to think about it. But I'm just sharing the general critique that we face whenever we talk about giving freedom to the kids. So now here's the problem. On the one hand, we have this radical freedom that we get with a democratic system. And on the other hand, we have the traditional system with practically zero freedom and autonomy, but it has this pressure to perform. So parents look at this and they feel, yeah, the traditional system, no doubt it has its issues, but at least my child is learning how to perform, how to compete. And that is going to help him face those realities in the real world. But, does the competition and pressure that you face in the traditional system really help you prepare for the real world? Maybe it doesn't. Maybe it actually hurts and works against your ability to compete in the real world. So yes, I keep hearing parents say, I want my kids to perform, I want my kids to compete. But here's the $1,000,000 question. Perform on what? On a bunch of stupid and meaningless exams? Now here's perhaps the biggest insight from Big Picture. How about we change the goalposts? How about instead of having kids perform on these standardized academic exams, we say the goal is to perform in any area of your choice based on your interests. You still need to perform, and we're all going to expect a lot from you, but in an area of your choice, in a domain of your choice. This simple and sensible change at the fundamental level, this change of goalposts, is what leads to a beautiful system of education. And frankly, everything else is just different structures to support this new direction of education. So let me reinforce this once again. The democratic system has practically 100% autonomy and freedom. There is no expectation, no mandate, and no active role for the adults. We then have the traditional system on the other extreme, which is completely controlled by adults and gives zero freedom and autonomy to the kids. But there is tremendous expectation from the kids and a lot of pressure to perform and compete. While everyone knows that the traditional system is deeply flawed in so many ways, the one thing that parents seem to like about the traditional system is the pressure, is the competition. Now I'm going to lay down a bunch of arguments to convince you that the pressure and competition of the traditional system is horribly counterproductive and harmful. And we will compare and contrast this to the big picture system, which is taking the same pressure and competition and applying it in a very different way. The first problem is standardization. The problem with the traditional system is not that there's pressure to perform. The problem is, why should everyone try to perform well at the exact same thing? That's not at all how the real world works, right? In fact, in the real world, all anyone cares about is what's different about you, what's unique about you, what different angle can you bring to the table. In the real world, you have to perform, but always in a field and career of your own choosing. And honestly, if you don't even know what you're good at, what career is right for you, then you're not really going to be able to perform in the real world. In fact, in my experience, most of the students that perform well in the traditional system feel quite lost in the real world because for the first time, nobody's telling them exactly what to do. The traditional system simply doesn't care what's unique about you, what's different about you, or what you want to do with your life. And with Big Picture, that's exactly where we start. From a very young age, we keep asking the same question: what's different about you? What are your strengths? What are your interests? The second point, which is somewhat related, is about choice. The traditional system is completely forced and there is very little choice, which is so ridiculous because if you consider the real world as your value system, tell me where this happens. The real world is full of choice. If you're not happy with your job, you can find a better one. Whatever career you pursue, whatever roles you take up, it's all by choice. So, again, when we're talking about performance and success, how can we take choice out of the equation? If you want to achieve great things in life, you're going to have to make a lot of choices and a lot of decisions. And nobody else can tell you what's right for you. So, just think about it for a second. In what situation do you think you will perform well? In a situation where you're forced to do things that you don't enjoy and don't find relevant, or in a situation where you're choosing to do something that you like and enjoy. And which one of these situations will genuinely help you perform and thrive and be successful in the real world? The next point I want to make is that the traditional system is what we call a zero-sum game. This means that for every winner, you have to have a loser. In fact, you can even argue that there is only one winner and everyone else is a loser. Now, this may exist in the real world, competitive sports being the best example. The rest of the world is what we call a non-zero sum game, which means that everyone can win. Everyone can progress together. So if I win, doesn't mean you lose. We can both win. In fact, this non-zero sumness is what has helped humanity progress tremendously. Because we realize that if I'm good at one thing and you're good at another thing, we can figure out an arrangement where we can both benefit. It's such a beautiful thing. There's actually this amazing book on the topic which says that humanity is going more and more in the direction of non-zero sumness. And that's what's leading to all the progress in the world. Coming back to education, I hope you can see the huge difference that this makes. In the traditional system, everyone is just trying to top an exam, but there can be only one topper. And all the rest of us are somewhere feeling like a loser. In big picture, each child is doing something different. So you can't even really compare, just like in the real world. And if someone does a great job at something, that doesn't make you a loser. You can do your own thing and just try to be the best version of yourself. Just like in the real world, where everyone is doing different things, people are learning from each other and getting inspired by each other. And there's none of this mad competition or rat race, as they call it. And the last point I want to make is around conversations. In big picture, the advisors are tracking and monitoring the work that each child is doing. And this whole process is so much more fun, not just for the student, but also the advisor, the parents, the mentors. Because in the traditional system, your whole conversation is based around boring stuff, right? How did you do on your last exam? Who scored the highest? What is your favorite subject? Did you finish your homework? But with big picture, the conversation is totally different because we're talking about what are your interests? What are you working on? Do you need any help with that? What do you enjoy doing? It's so much more fun, it's so much more real, and it's so fulfilling. I really can't begin to tell you how different it feels to connect with kids on their interests, on their unique journeys, while all the while playing the role of the advisor and demanding and expecting things from them. And that's where we are happy if parents apply this same pressure as well. Say your child wants to be an architect. He set up some goals about how he's going to design a house on this piece of land that his grandfather has. Now, this makes for a fantastic discussion at home where you can definitely question your child, challenge your child, give him ideas, suggestions, feedback, or maybe there's not much progress happening and you see that the child hasn't really produced much work. This also makes for an interesting conversation. Hey, what's going on? You said you were interested in architecture, so how come you're not doing too much work? Maybe you're not really interested and this isn't the right thing for you. If that's the case, you can say so. You can try something else. Or else, you really need to produce something because I'm not seeing much progress. So that's how the pressure to perform comes in with big picture. And in my opinion, this is all very healthy pressure. It's the kind of pressure that you will face in the real world, allowing for a lot of choice and autonomy and making things much more in line with the real world.